Welcome to the Wayne Bennett Podcast, celebrating West Virginia's people, places, and the culture of Southern Appalachia. Now here's your host, Wayne Bennett.
Welcome to Wayne Bennett's Podcast. I'm your host, Wayne Bennett, and this is episode 186. It's May the 11th, 2026, and it's the day after Mother's Day and the day before the election in our country. It's midterm elections, and so I guess there's kind of an irony between the Mother's Day and the election day. We'll see how that goes. But today our guest is a former athlete from Shady Spring High School, and he is a retired conservation officer in West Virginia. Jeff Sweeney, thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Now, let's go back a little bit. Your dad, Jack Sweeney,
Right.
What did your dad do?
He was the telephone guy. He started with the telephone company not long after he got out of high school, 1957. And he worked there until I think it was 92. And he took a buyout with the phone company.
How many siblings do you
I have two brothers and we all have a sister. So there's four of us all together.
Are you the oldest, youngest?
I am the baby boy.
Oh, you're the baby.
And I was
Once
told
they got perfection.
I was told if I'd have been a girl, there would have only been 3 kids, but Julie is the youngest. So.
Well, I was a baby boy in my family too. So, now you got one brother, John. I think he fishes with my neighbor a lot.
Oh yes,
Trout fishing.
I come by a big pothole and I thought I would see him there fishing, but because he could probably catch a fish in the road.
Did your dad hunt and fish?
He hunted and fished. He was big into turkey hunting and bear hunting, and more fishing after he retired.
Now you played a lot of sports. Did you live in Daniels or Beaver or Shady?
Daniels. We lived on the C&O Dam Road. That was our last stop for houses. We started out. I remember living in Crab Orchard about the time my sister was born, and they were building the road, the 4-lane to Sophia, and we lived behind the old Crab Orchard planing mill area, and every time it rained, our house flooded. So Dad got tired of carrying us from the porch to the car, so we moved out in this area.
Did you build a house out there? Or?
We bought a coal company house.
Yeah.
It was one of the originals. It didn't have a bathroom. And Dad and some other people built a bathroom, a bedroom, and a utility room on the back of it, so we wouldn't have to go outside.
Now, how close were you to the Boy Scout camp?
Boy Scout camp's probably another 1.5 miles out the road. From top same camp I lived in is called Camp Road, and it's the first road on the left going out to the C&O.
Now, did you ever go down to C&O Dam, to the pond, the water down
Oh
there?
yeah.
Is it still there?
As far as I know, it is. I haven't been out through there in years.
We used to, when I was in the Boy Scouts, we'd go there in the summertime, and of course that scout troop I had, we was kind of like the Bad News Bears, and we'd always elect one guy to walk out of the camp and over to Daniels on the main road to the store and buy some candy and stuff, bring it back to us at the camp because they didn't have any there at the camp at that time. But it's been years. Now you played a lot of sports as a kid, didn't you?
Yes, sir.
You played football for Ivan Farley.
Midget league football, yes. My brother John played. I think he played 3 years. I was able to play 4. I remember I went the first year I tried to go. I wasn't old enough, and I cried. But because I really wanted to play football.
Well, you one year you played. They had an all-star. You were on the all-star team. I remember that. They didn't have all-stars when I played youth football.
Right.
Now you played basketball for Daniels.
Yes.
The elementary?
Yeah, JD. I played for Carl Oaks, and I think 2 years. And then the last, I guess when I was in the fifth grade, Mr. Oaks, that was the year he retired. He turned 65 that year. So J.D. Robinson ended up at Daniels Elementary, and he was our coach, and we won the district that year. Yeah.
J.D. was out there.
Yeah.
He was over here at Stanford for a while before he got out of education.
Right.
And he was at Slab Fork, I think.
Yeah. Well, you know, I grew up in his neighborhood. He was older than me, but his brother's younger brother, Greg, and then Dennis was about 3 months older than me, but he was a year ahead of me in school. And we were big buddies, you know, all those years.
Yeah, J.D. I played football with him and Jeff, and his dad was one of the coaches there
Right.
at East Beckley. Back then, they didn't have a team from Shady at that time. Did your dad take you hunting and fishing when?
More hunting than fishing.
Still after.
We went. I mean, my great grandfather had a place there at Gent, and we would go to his pond and fish and stuff like that. And sometimes we'd go to Pocahontas County. We'd go to Buffalo Lake and fish. But Dad really got into fishing more after he retired.
Well, also in elementary school, you kind of got into 4-H, didn't you?
Yes, sir.
I guess 4-H is still pretty big out in the Shady Spring area.
Right. It is, I think. I know in Point Pleasant, where I'm at now, it's a big deal.
Is it?
All 3 of my grandkids are into 4-H hot and heavy, and of course it involves the fair. Mason County has the second largest fair compared to the state fair in West Virginia.
Now you did a lot of with the 4-H. What was the Hustler group you were in? You were president of it.
You know, I don't remember a whole lot. The biggest reason I wanted to be in 4-H was so I could go to 4-H camp every year. That was, you know, of course we would do crafts and stuff. And there would always be a game warden there that taught hunter safety. And there was a trooper there that taught highway safety and always showed the gruesome videos of car crashes. So I always tried to be in those 2 groups.
Yeah, I remember you got a social studies award one time as an elementary student. And,
I was just as surprised as everybody else.
Yeah. Maybe you were the last one. Give me something.
Right.
But also, you guys were pretty active in the church, though. I remember specifically you were in one of these fundraisers for Ziegler guy.
Right.
What happened?
He was, his grandparents went to church with us, and he was in an accident and got paralyzed. And he was maybe a little bit older than me, but I remember them talking about raising money. So I was talking to my mother, and I says, "Why can't we do something to raise money for him?" And I said, "Why not get a basketball? Have a little basketball thing and raise money with the proceeds?" And I guess she got with Coach Rife. Because John was, of course, in junior high, playing for him, football and basketball at the time. And they worked out a deal, and I got to pick who played who. A lot of people didn't know that, but I was the one. I decided who played who, and of course, we won our game. Yeah. Yeah. But, of course, we won the district that year, too. So, it was a win-win.
Yeah.
The way that went.
Now when you went to Shady junior high, was Coach Rife the football coach?
Yeah, football and basketball. Him and Arnie Richmond was his assistant.
Yeah. And Coach Rife was there quite a while. And I remember, of course, I wasn't coaching at that time at Park, but you guys beat Park that year in the 9th grade, didn't you?
Yeah. We won the county basketball championship that year, and we did beat Park in football. We had a lot of trouble with Beckley. When we went to play Beckley, it had rained for 40 days and 40 nights. So everybody's at Van Meter Stadium that night getting ready to play. And they called the game because Woodrow was going to be playing the next day. So I think we could have beat them that Thursday, but the next Monday we played that game during the day, and I think we got beat 20-8.
Yeah, that field.
Peters was the coach over there, and his dad and my dad were good friends. They went to high school together at Shady Spring.
Yeah, Peters had some good teams. And the first year I coached at Park, he was the head coach at Beckley, and Jack Richmond was his assistant.
Yeah.
And that was good. That was both. I mean,
Right.
Jack was on the football team East Beckley when I started, and he was our quarterback. And then Sterling Lewis took his place the next year, and both those guys went on to have great high school careers. But now you, when you got in high school, of course they didn't have they had junior high wrestling.
They did.
Did you wrestle in junior?
Dave Wills was the coach, and my junior high year, right before basketball season came in, I broke my ankle. So I was out until probably the last 2 games of the regular season. So when I came back, Dave Wills was my homeroom teacher. Wasn't my teacher, but I had to report to him for homeroom. So we become pretty good friends. And so he was the track coach. So when basketball season was over, I wanted to run track. And there was a wrestling AAU event coming up in Huntington. And he asked me if I wanted to go. And I said, sure, where is it? And he said, Huntington. I said, I'll have to find out. I said, you got to stay the night? Oh, yeah, you got to stay the night. So they worked out all the logistics, and I got to go. And it wasn't the first match I ever saw, but it was the first match I was ever dressed to wrestle. And I faced Raleigh County champion at 155. And I pinned him in 30 seconds. And Coach Manning come over there, and he's all excited. And he said, you put him in the cowboy. Well, you put him in the cowboy and pinned him. I said, well, is that good or bad? He goes, oh, that's good. That's good. So I kind of fell in love with it then. And Coach Manning asked me if I wanted to go to camp, and I said, yeah. I was going into my sophomore year. So I said, how much does it cost? He said, I'll take care of it. All you got to do is mow my yard. So I mowed his yard for...
So y'all went to Clarion or something?
We went to Clarion 2 years.
Yeah,
we went to Waynesburg.
Really? And
then Clarion, the year that I was a senior, that summer, they went to Clarion. And I didn't know if I was going to be, that. I had a car wreck in my junior year, so it was the 4th day of football practice. Coach Hill had just been the new coach at Shady. And when I had that car wreck, it just kind of changed all my life plans and everything. So
let's go back a second. As a sophomore, you ended up starting in football,
right?
And that's with John Lynch and Jeff Tilley and those guys,
yes,
right?
Yeah.
And and did you start on the wrestling team?
No.
Okay. And then the junior years when you had the car wreck.
Yeah, I didn't get to do anything in junior year.
What
lift weights? Coach Hill had me lifting weights.
Injuries you had?
Well, I broke my. They said I crushed my ankle. Had to have pins and screws put in my ankle. Broke my knee. So I wore a cast from my foot to my hip from August until just before Christmas. And then I got a half cast from the knee down. And then I guess it was spring break of 79. I was getting ready to get off a whole week of school and Well, Mom, they'd set up surgery to take my pins and screws out that week. I had trouble walking because the pin and the screw that was in my ankle would not let me bend my foot, and my foot would slap like a flat-footed person because I didn't have no way. I couldn't bend it without it hurting really bad. So when I got rid of those pins and screws, it was back to normal again. So
Does that bother you now?
it never bothers me. I was pretty fortunate.
Yeah.
Trying to convince my mother and dad to let me play football my senior year was a challenge, but my orthopedic doctor was Dr. Landis, and he said, he's better than he was before as far as the ankle and everything. And so
was Fred Hill the head coach then?
He just started my junior year. Sterling Lewis, my sophomore year, was the head coach.
So what kind of a 12th grade football season did you have?
We were 7-3. We lost in overtime to Richwood, which was a killer because of their classification. They had a good team.
Yeah.
And we lost to Fayetteville, which killed us. We put their quarterback out in the first half with a broken nose. And he went away in the ambulance, and, we were kind of kicking their rear end. Halftime, that ambulance came back, and I thought, well, they got to have a ambulance here,
They brought him back.
Well, they brought him back, and they beat us. I think Coach Spangler was the coach over there then.
Dix called me, and that's when you were a senior, and they're going to wrestle a scrimmage. I think it was against Herbert Hoover.
Oh yeah,
and
it was terrible.
So I said he wanted me to come out and referee. So I don't think anybody else was there, but I didn't really know you that well, and I was calling a match, and man, you was beating this guy and vicious crossface. I said, and it was a scrimmage, I said, I penalized you. I said, man, you can't throw one like that. They come from downtown, man. Then did it again a little bit later. Of course, she was ahead. I said, I just stopped it, and that was it. But I told Dix, I said, man, he's gonna get thrown out of some matches if he got to calm that down just a little bit. Ain't nothing wrong with being aggressive, but it was. And then, of course, I saw you. I never refereed too many matches of Shady. Pate King was doing a lot. Ron Rose was doing some, I think, but used to have some wars with Carl Cousins from Backway.
Yeah, Carl and I, we were actually friends, but except when we wrestled, and we had some. Our record against each other was 2-2. Yeah, I beat Carl the first time. Then he beat me in the big old match at Woodrow Wilson that night, where it seems like everybody was there.
I was there.
And then I actually beat him in the Coalfield in the finals on a slim margin. Carl was working on my knee, and a lot of people didn't know which knee it was because we wore the tights, and they try to figure it out. So I started wearing a knee brace on my other knee. So when people would work on the knee, they was working on the other, and that seemed to work for me because I never had nobody mess with my other knee.
Your bad knee.
Yeah.
Camouflage there, I guess. When you were at Shady, your sophomore year, you was vice president of the sophomore class, wasn't you?
Yes, sir. I guess it was a popularity thing. I was always involved in the fundraising, car washes and stuff like that. Back then, a fellow by the name of Greg Darby was kind of starting this business, little general stuff, and he would let us use his facilities to do car washes and have fundraisers and stuff. So it worked out pretty good. Of course, Pam, his sister, she was ahead of me in school, but Greg always helped everybody out in the community, still does.
Now that senior year, you guys remember you and Steve Bettis were good best friends. Steve just passed away
Yes, sir.
a couple months ago, I guess. But y'all worked out together, I guess.
Right.
He was 155, he was 167. And tell us a bit about that. I mean,
Well, Steve and I were pretty much best friends, inseparable all through high school. Our sophomore year, we didn't wrestle on the first team, but Coach Manning made us managers. So we traveled with the team, and we always doing this and whatever Coach said. If Coach needed chewing tobacco, I had to go to the store and buy chewing tobacco for him. But the senior year, Steve and I weighed about the same. So we didn't really want to wrestle each other to see, who was going to wrestle what. So we flipped a coin, and I lost. And
so you went to 67.
I went to 67. He stayed at 55. And
but you both finished third place in the
Right.
state.
Yeah.
And he lost, I can't remember who he lost to now, but you lost to the Mahan guy who won the state championship.
Yeah, Bobby. He was I had finished ahead of him in a tournament earlier that year. And I was probably a little bit overconfident going into that match. It was a semifinal match, the state tournament. And, well, it didn't work. It didn't work out too good for me. And then
It was a pretty close match. I think
Yeah.
it was 13-9 or something
Yeah.
like that. And then Steve, he lost to the guy who lost in the finals. I can't remember I think the guy who won in his weight class was Rick Bells from down in Dunbar.
the thing about it, I had beat every kid in the state tournament but Mahan. All the guys that placed, I'd beat them. I think the guy from Dunbar placed second to Mahan. I had beat him twice that year.
Yeah. Some people's styles.
Luck of the bracket sometimes, and
Absolutely.
I never, some people would, I guess, play a game with looking at a future bracket. I didn't. I just looked at winning. I didn't care about the future bracket. Coach said, cream always comes to the top. It don't matter about the bracket. So.
Yeah. Well, they used to put the brackets out at the beginning of the season.
Right.
And that was, I don't know why they did that, and now I think the evolution, they've changed that they seed a little bit in the tournament, and it's kind of hard to see people from different parts of the state, when they haven't seen each other, but
Right.
they do a pretty good job after the first round. I kind of like the way they're doing it now.
Yeah.
And it used to be, and there still is, there used to be a lot of times state championship was decided in the quarterfinals or definitely the semifinals, and it still is some. But,
Right.
I think it's a lot better. They've improved a lot. And they're taking more wrestlers. Years ago, there used to be 4 people would come out of the region, and
Right.
I mean, one from each region, that was it. And so it didn't give big opportunity. Now, when but you guys won state championships, team
Right.
state championship in 1980. David Farley was a champion. You guys placed third. I don't know who.
Troy Goodson was a runner-up
Troy.
2 years in a row.
Yeah.
And it was a kid from Buffalo, Buffalo Wayne,
Yeah.
that always gave him fits.
Cletus Harmon, was he on that 80 team?
Cletus was on the 80 team, yeah, and the 81 team. Charlie Williamson was on that team.
But y'all they won an 80 and 81. Now, when you graduated, what was you going to do after you graduated?
Well, I had spoke with Bear Simpkins, who was the head coach at Marshall, and he invited me to come down to Marshall. And that spring break of my senior year, he called and said, "Hey, we got a tournament this weekend. I'd like for you to come down." So I went down there, and there was a guy from Nicholas County, Rick Leggett. He was a state champ at 155. He was there, and a lot of guys I knew was down there, and we wrestled. And Simpkins, he said, "We got a place for you on the team next year." And I said, "Okay." So I started getting everything together. I even got a job. I got a job working on the Henderson Center, which was in the early stages of being built. And there was a local contractor that was going to be down there, and he promised me a job. And just before, I guess, football started for the Marshall, I get a call from Simpkins that they've done away with
The wrestling.
the wrestling program. And I guess there were some violations of stuff that I didn't have any idea what it was. The basketball team had got in some trouble too. But Bear, I guess, had got into big trouble, and they relieved him of his duties. And
Well, Bear was a different breed. Ezra Simpkins was his name. And
yes,
I remember I was coaching at Woodrow when he coached. I think it was Boyd County, Kentucky. It was one of them Kentucky teams, and he didn't have a practice room, and so they would run and stuff, and then they had in Kentucky at that time they didn't have a limit on how many times you could wrestle, and I think he had 56 matches, and most of them was duels and tries, And it's like they wrestled 3 or 4 times a week, and no tournaments or anything. But he was, and then I had him up here for a camp one year, and he was supposed to start at 8 o'clock. It was a clinic. It was at 8 o'clock on Saturday morning. Man, 7:45, he's not there. 8 o'clock, he's not there, and it didn't have cell phones. I didn't know, and I had a couple of helpers. I said, "We're gonna have to do it ourselves." Some kids said, "Well, there's a van outside in the parking lot," and I went out there and looked, and he's there sound asleep. He'd been there the night. He'd come the night before, we got him up and did a great job. The kids loved him. He was a fantastic guy. And he wrestled at Marshall the same time Bill Archer did. So you worked at home, and I know you got into refereeing some. What'd you do around the house? Since you didn't go to Marshall.
well, I started going to Beckley College. I had a full load. I had 15 hours first semester, and I was working full time at Little Beaver. I worked into a position over there. I started out as a summer youth program supervisor, and the guy that was the aide, he was also an electrician in the coal mines, and he decided to go back into mines, and his job was open, and I applied for it. And of course you had to take civil service test, and you had to score a certain amount. So I went and took it, and they said you can come back and review it in 30 days, and then you can take it again 30 days after that. So I did that 3 times and got on the number 1 on the roster. The last time I took it, I was number 1 on the roster, and they put me in that position. I think it was March the 1st of 81. And I went under civil service and did 6 months of probation, which, back at that time you could do probation standing on your head and still walk out without staggering. So that just worked out, for me. And of course I was still going to college at night.
Who was the head guy at Little Beaver?
Ernie Adkins. He was there from,
Yeah,
he was there from probably right after they became a state park. And he was there, and he left sometime after I did. And he retired, and then he went back to work at Kanawha State Forest and worked over there for a while.
Did that job make you want to get into being a conservation natural resource?
Well, all the extra vehicles for law enforcement was kept at Little Beaver, so I knew all the officers, Captain Pizzino, and Lieutenant Payne was there. He lived at the park. And prior to that, I guess Fields who's the dad of the guy that I took his place. He was in Beckley, and he went to Charleston as like the number 2 guy in the DNR. He lived at Little Beaver at one time, and his kids. Brent was a Shady Spring graduate. I think he graduated in 75 or 76. He was quite a football player.
We got you involved in the wrestling. That's when the youth program was coming along pretty good, and there were at that time we didn't have but a couple officials around, and so I was trying to get the thing built up. And I was just thinking about and we worked the youth programs for nothing. You didn't get paid. It was all volunteer.
Right.
And not like that now, but back then, we would have youth wrestling once or twice a week, and sometimes on Saturdays. But I tried to make a list. I hope I didn't leave anybody out. But we had some of the guys we had around that time was Steve Cook. He was an old Shady guy, wrestled I think 112. Mark Stewart was a Shady guy. Pate King from Mullins, Randy Lilly, Mike Tyree, Jerry Zaffaratis, Steve Castanon, Charlie Eastep. Charlie Eastep, he coached a little bit in the youth wrestling. I don't think he ever wrestled, but his brother did, and he kind of picked up on the sport. Rocky Powell, Dave Walker, Jim Wood, Randy Worley, Rodney Elam, and Rodney, he ended up calling a bunch of state tournaments, later. Phil Honecker, Bill Stone, Joe Rubel.
Dave Ransom.
That was a pretty good bunch of guys.
Yeah, that was a big group too.
Yeah. And,
probably don't have that today. Unless it's the biggest.
They dropped down again. When I got out of it, there just wasn't much interest and so we started having, around here, they started having to get guys from Charleston and stuff to come up and just call anything.
Right.
And then Guy Holliday took over the Southern Coalfield Board, and he's got it built up. It's big now, and they're well trained, and they actually Canal Valley's dropped off a lot since George Keeney passed away.
Right, he was big there.
Now Charleston and some parts of central West Virginia stuff, they're calling Southern Coalfield guys to come up, and of course then now they have, with the youth, they have tournaments every weekend, and those guys, but they don't work for free.
I've seen some of the officiating with my grandsons, and I tell you, there's when they wrestle in Gallia County, there's some female officials that are really good.
Yeah.
There's 2 that are very, very good.
Yeah. That
just impress me.
Well, that's the thing. You've got girls wrestling now. It's just growing like crazy, and of course female officials. I don't know how many Southern Coalfield's got. They've got a few, and I think I haven't watched them that closely, but I've never seen any of them get in serious trouble or anything. But so around 82, you started working as a conservation officer or Department of Natural Resources in Charleston, didn't you, or Kanawha County?
Yeah, when I went there in 84. I worked at Little Beaver for 4 years.
Okay.
And then I applied for conservation officer's job to transfer into law enforcement. And I was told they didn't take transfers. And so I had a couple people write a letter of recommendation, which back in the old days, you had to have recommendation from the sheriff and from somebody else. So Everett Bennett he was deputy sheriff in Raleigh County and a friend of the family. Everett, I went to school with his boys. So Everett wrote me a letter, and Tom Canterbury wrote a letter for me.
Did they send you to school or something?
They sent me to the academy.
To the state police?
Yeah, I went there. It was 15 weeks. I went with all the other basic guys. Anybody that wanted to be a police officer other than a trooper had to go longer, but you had to go to the basic academy. So
when you got out of the academy, did you get a job right there in Kanawha County?
yeah, they assigned me to Kanawha County, and the guy that I went with, he got assigned to Raleigh County.
Oh.
He was from Kanawha area.
Could have switched it off.
He actually lived in Putnam County, right beside the John Amos power plant. But it worked out. He came here to Raleigh, and I went down there.
Now, did you marry a Raleigh County girl or a Point Pleasant girl?
I married a Point Pleasant girl.
Okay. So how did you end up in Point Pleasant?
Well, it's kind of a crazy story, but I was the young guy in my county. There was 3 of us at the time. The McDowell twins were there, and they were from Summers County, and me. So after I got there for a few months, we were known as McDowell, and McSweeney. But one day we were getting ready to go to a meeting, and our sergeant said, "You guys need to go serve this warrant on this guy." And this guy was the head of the Drilling Corporation, which later became Mountaineer Gas. But at the time, it was, I think, called Allegheny and Western Energy. So I didn't know what the process was on arresting these people. So I had to consult the state code, and it said that when you have a paperwork that's got to be served on a corporation, they have a designated agent that takes care of that, and you call the designated agent, and they just meet you at the magistrate's office. You execute the warrant, and they set the date for everything. And it was a warrant that was obtained by the Water Resources Division of the agency at the time. At that time, we were kind of a bigger agency, not just law enforcement. But so I called the corporation to ask them who their agent was, and they said they don't have one. So I looked back in the code, and it said if they don't have an agent, you arrest the president of the corporation. So we went down to his office, which was about a block and a half from the courthouse, and we had a S10 Blazer. Back in those days, it was the 2-door, small, So we went down there, and we parked in front of the building. We went up the elevator, and we need to talk to so-and-so. And they said, well, he's in his office. So we just went down the hallway where his office was, and I didn't know what he looked like, but his name was on the door, and it was on the desk. And, I told him why we were there. So he picked up the phone first thing and called the governor's office. I hung up the phone for him. And then I told him, I said, hey, it's just a formality. We need to go down and take care of this, and you'll be back in no time. So I was on his right, and my partner, Chuck, was on the left as we were walking down the hallway. And, of course, he's screaming and, call this, call the governor, call Archmore, call his aide, this. And, of course, we're just going down the hall. When we got to the elevator, I was on his right. Well, he drawed back his fist to punch my partner with the right, and I grabbed a hold of him, and I just put him in handcuffs. So we got him down to the car, and he would not cooperate and get in the back of the car. So I said, well, we'll just walk down to the magistrate's office. Well, he refused to walk. So we kind of drug him down there with his toes on the sidewalk for a block and a half. And by the time we got there, all of his people, the news was there and everything. So we went in, I executed the warrants, and, well, I didn't do anything else. Then, things broke loose a few weeks later with them wanting this dropped, and they're wanting to do this, and the lawsuit here and everything. So as a result of that, I'm the first person that ever sued me. That happened. They sued me for quite a bit of money. But that fall, the fall of '85, I had made a significant deer case, which was actually a cow case. I arrested some guys for shooting some cows that were out trying to spotlight deer. So they couldn't find any deer, so they killed some cows. So
Why do people do that stuff?
Because they're crazy, I guess. I've seen a lot of things in my career that I wonder why people do this, but we ended up, I ended up charging those 3 guys, which is funny how it all happened. I was by myself when I arrested all 3 of them, one at a time. Had them all 3 in the car. The last guy I arrested, he was in the guard on the hill at the airport. And when I got him, I put him in the car. And then we indicted him. And then I went back. I had went back for one of those hearings on that case. And one of my Charleston PD friends said, "Hey, did you hear about Leslie?" Which was the guy from the gas company. I said, "No." He said, "Well, he got arrested the other night." I said, "Really?" I said, "Drunk driving?" He goes, "Oh, no. Shoplifting." I said, "Shoplifting?" I said, you gotta be kidding me." He said, "No." So I called our attorney, which was K. Castone Cheney, and told him that Mr. Leslie had been arrested, and which is not his real name, but anyway, he said okay. And about 3 weeks later, the judge did summary judgment, dismissed the case against me and the department that he had filed. And he lost his job. And, well, they was wanting to get me out of Kanawha County. In Mason County, Tom Canterbury's brother-in-law, Clarence Worley, was there. And he grew up with Coach Rife down in Bolt. And he was the officer in Mason County. So I went down there to work with him and just never left.
Well, do you have like an advisory board or somebody that advises you, somebody over you that in case you make a mistake? I mean,
Yeah, you have a supervisor.
yeah.
Your first line supervisor, sergeant, and then lieutenant and captain.
How high do the officers go? I mean, sergeant, do they go to lieutenant?
Well, they have right now. They have. I was one of the first corporals when they instituted that rank, which didn't mean anything except a boost in pay. When they promoted people that you had to be 17 years to get corporal, and there was 20 of us, and I was the 20. I was number 20 of the ones that qualified when they first done that. Then now they have a first sergeant, and I think they only have one. Then you have lieutenant, captain, and then everything else is at headquarters. You got majors, and lieutenant colonels. And there's captains at headquarters.
Once read that in Mason County, you were involved in this one, I think, and a guy, there was a big buck that these guys have been trying to kill for a few years, and a guy went on somebody's property and killed it, and he didn't even have a license or anything. Plus, he's on somebody's property without
Plus, he was a felon.
permission, and he ran out of gas as he was taking them, and you arrested him.
Right. If you Google Jeff Sweeney, that case pops up on the internet
Yeah,
with
that's where I saw
a
it.
picture of the deer, which, there was a lot of people that were after that deer. He didn't just hang out on that property, but it was within 50 yards of the Ohio River. So Meigs County is known for big deer like that. So, it could have came from Meigs County and just made a home in West Virginia. I don't know. But right in that area where that was, it's 50 yards from the Ohio River.
When we used to go to Point Pleasant and wrestle, the bus would get off of 64 around St. Albans, I think, and we'd go up that 2-lane road then through Winfield, I think.
62.
And I tell the kids to count the deer on not just the dead deer that the trucks hit, but the live deer in the fields. It was unbelievable. I mean, there'd be herds of them.
Yeah. Well, when I first went to Mason County, that was a big spotlighting county. was everybody would tell everybody, you get on Route 35, and when you get to Mason County, there's deer everywhere. And, we would get people sometimes from Elkview, they would say, hey, we was told we come down here, we can see the deer. I said, yeah, but you can't spotlight them. That's illegal. But you'd be surprised at how many people, not just locals you would get, but how many people would come out of the area and, well, why would you be here? Well, they told us if we came down Route 35, coming toward Point Pleasant, when we got to Mason County, there would be deer everywhere. Of course, there usually was. It was a big deal.
Well, those big tractor and trailers would go down through there, and man, I mean, they'd be deer laying on both sides of the road. They didn't slow down when the deer ran across. And I read a thing in the Charleston paper where these food places, these guys every morning would go through there and pick up the fresh deer that were killed and process them, and feeding the homeless.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy.
Since I have you on the show, let me a couple questions about. I know you're would have to be a gun person. What about in the Second Amendment? I believe as far as guns, people that hunt and those kind of things. But what's your feeling about the rapid fire guns, the guns that they even make guns now that'll shoot 1,000,000 shots in a minute, and stuff.
It's crazy.
And what is that available to just regular citizens?
Well, I think that if you're shooting automatic, I think there's certain stipulations that you've got to meet to be able to do that. Like if you have a gun that, this is from memory, if you have a gun that can shoot either semi or automatic, you have to have a permit for the auto sear that you use to put in the firearm to make it become fully automatic. And then several years ago, the AR-15 people came out with what they call a bump stock. And what happened was that bump stock was stiff, but you could take the thing off of where it was rigid to make it move, and the recoil of the gun would make it shoot as if it were an automatic weapon.
Oh.
And I couldn't tell the difference between an automatic and the AR with the bump stock. And then at some point, those bump stocks were illegal. If you had them, you were supposed to destroy them. And I'm sure people lost them in a boat wreck or something somewhere, but I don't know that they'll ever come back or not. It's hard to tell.
Guns now think that will shoot different caliber bullets, and just at the same time, it's and I don't know. I'm not an anti-gun person. I've got guns myself, but I just can't figure out why there wouldn't. If there wasn't a market for those things, people wouldn't buy them.
Well, I tell you, I worked Mason County, and we had 2 ranges at the public hunting areas, and you would see the hunters come out to those ranges, and I think it's a good thing. And sometimes you would have a guy that would have a fully automatic, and he would shoot it in a safe way and everything. When I became a supervisor, I went to Kanawha County was part of my area, and they had a range. The clientele at the range at Kanawha State Forest was not the same clientele you've seen at McClinic Wildlife Area and Chief Cornstalk Wildlife Area. It was people that you would look at them and watch the way they act, and it was all questionable. I mean,
they didn't even have them.
Yeah, you could, and they weren't safe. I wrote tickets for people not being safe out there. Tell them to leave. But I know I was out there one day, and of course you're only supposed to shoot at a certain target: paper, clay. You could take cardboard and shoot at it. When you leave, it goes with you. a guy stopped in a car that had a big trunk, and he started pulling out television sets that he had picked up at a box, that were no good, to put them on the range to shoot at.
Wow.
Yeah, and just leave them there after they got through, which it was crazy.
Has anybody ever shot at you?
I had a guy shoot at me one time, I think, and
Because, I mean, they're as crazy as people are, and some of them on whatever drug they're on, and then you approach three guys and they're going to take them in or arrest them. I mean, it seems like somebody's going to do something crazy.
I can remember one time I had crawled trying to catch a guy in a turkey blind, and it was the last day of the season, and I didn't think we'd catch anybody. But as I walked down this path, I could hear him calling, and I knew where the blind was because I'd taken people out of that blind prior to the season coming in. That's how things worked out. So this is the last day, and I'm crawling to the blind, and I'm about 10 feet away from the blind, and the guy shoots. And I'd always heard that if you get shot, that you wouldn't hear it. But I felt the concussion of the gun when he shot. So I just stopped and looked at myself, and I realized I hadn't been shot. I turned around, my sergeant was behind me, and he's pointing up. And I'm right at the blind, getting ready to pounce on the blind. And this guy is out in the middle where the corn is. There's a tree, and he's up in that tree. He didn't know we was in there from Adam. So we waited until he was coming down out of the tree with his back to us, and he had hung his gun on a limb. And then, of course, I hollered at game warden. Of course, he about had a heart attack. But crazy stuff. You just never know.
What do you think about I don't know whether it's true or not, but the president is going to relieve, he's going to let people hunt certain ways in national parks and stuff now, not national forests, but national parks and stuff. Do you think that's a good thing? I mean,
well, it depends on the national park, probably, but it's kind of like, I don't know what all about the situation, but we have urban hunts every now and then in different, like Kanawha County, Huntington's, places like that, where the deer population is tearing everything up, and there's no hunting, but you can do urban hunts with bows and arrows and stuff like that to kind of relieve the pressure from the wildlife. And I don't know much. I'm not up on the news very much, but I think in some cases there could be issues where they need to be thinned out.
yeah.
I know one of my favorite places is the Smoky Mountains, and last year they banned people in Gatlinburg from putting out pumpkins for decorations because of the bear problem. The National Park Service and those people down there had been fighting the bear to stay out of the trash. So then they got the trash to where it's secure. So now the bear has looking for something else. So it goes to pumpkins and other things that they could get into. Since they can't get into the boxes, they're bear proof, then they're seeking other sources of food.
Have you been active, had to move bears and stuff?
Yes.
You were in 37 years,
Yeah.
right?
Well, I moved a lot of bears in Kanawha County when I was stationed there. That was probably the biggest bear county. We would move bear to, R.D. Bailey was one of our places we moved bear to. And I remember in 1985, we moved a bear to R.D. Bailey. And that was back when they were redoing the turnpike and making the road above the tunnel. And that Labor Day weekend, a bear was hit right there at the tunnel, and it had 2 compound fractures on its legs, back legs. And when I got there, it had crawled off. And I tracked it down to Paint Creek, and it had went up the hill. And I thought, he can't go very far with 2 compound fractures. And that October, I got a call to go to a mine operation in Montgomery, and that bear was there, and we put it down. That bear had went that far.
A bear roam. How far will they go?
Well, the one bear I'm talking about, we had moved it from Marmette to R.D. Bailey in April, and it was headed back to Marmette.
See, I've heard a story. I've got a place on Loops Road, a little small, we call it a farm, but it's more like a camp. But there was a guy that lived close there, and I think they did a newspaper story on him years ago. And he had some beehives, and there was a bear kept getting into these beehives. Well, he got permission to kill it, and they killed it, and it had a tag on it or something, and it was right outside of Roanoke, Virginia.
Really?
And I mean, of course, if you go a straight line, it's not that far, but I mean, it's a long, but that's amazing.
We had a bear one time that it was St. Albans, and they was bringing it. They were going to take it, I think, into Wayne County. And on the way down the road, bear started waking up. So they dropped the bear off in Cornstalk early in the morning. I'm talking, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. And they were building redoing the locks at Robert C. Byrd, which was at that time called, I think it was called Gal Police Locks back in the day. But they changed it to Robert C. Byrd when they dug out the canal and everything. Well, the bear ended up in Henderson, right there on the border, and it was tearing up trash cans like crazy. So then it quit tearing up trash cans like crazy. Then it went to Ojai. Ojai trapped it. They tagged it in the other ear. It had a West Virginia tag, had an Ojai tag, and then it got trapped again in Ojai. They tagged it, so it had 2 tags in one ear and 1 tag in the other ear. And I'm at Mason one day on a boat, and somebody comes and say, hey, there's a bear swimming the river. So I go up. They think I'm going to kill the bear, and I go up to keep everybody away from the bear. And it was that bear swimming the river in Mason, which is the northernmost part of Mason County. And as it's swimming the river, I got all the boats out of the way, and it got on the bank, and I don't think anybody's seen it after that. The next time it was seen was in Leon at the old carbide mine. A woman called me. She said, now, I'm going to tell you what I saw. And she said, I don't drink. I said, what'd you see? She said, I thought I saw a bear with a tag in one ear and 2 tags in the other. But she said, they were cow tags. Tell me I'm stupid. And I said, no, you did see it. And I said, about 2 weeks ago, it came through Mason. I said, he's on his way back to St. Albans. And he made it back to St. Albans. But it took him a few months. But he was tagged twice in Ohio and moved. But that homing, that's a natural homing thing in them.
Now you married a Point Pleasant girl. How many kids did you have?
2.
Two boys? Or?
2 boys, yeah.
Did they wrestle, either one of them?
Brandon did. Chris did not.
And now you got grandkids. How many grandkids you got?
Got 5.
That'll keep you busy. They all live in the Point Pleasant area?
2 of them live in Milton. They go to the granddaughter. She's the oldest girl, the oldest one. She'll be 17 in June. She goes to Cabell Midland High School. She's a junior. And her little brother just turned 13. He goes to Milton Middle School. And then Brandon's kids, the oldest one is 15. He's a freshman. The next is 13. Yeah, the next one's 13. He wrestled. He is a 7th grader, and he's in track right now. And the baby girl is, she's the miracle baby. She is 11. She'll be 12 in August, and she's back in the softball thing again. She likes softball and volleyball. And
Now they're building something around Point Pleasant, a big fact. What they building there?
well, Nucor is building
Yeah,
the largest steel plant in the world. It's at Apple Grove. It's about 15, 20 miles south of Point Pleasant on Route 2. And they're also building a data center just north of Point Pleasant, about 4 miles. Yeah, and it's a big deal and a lot of big controversies over that. But it's between Point Pleasant and the women's prison. Women's prison is there at Lake. And
Wait, how when's Nucor supposed to complete that? You know,
I think maybe 2 years before
there'll be
everything.
a lot of jobs
Yes.
if it ever happens.
Right, and a lot of high-paying jobs. I think the low end of the high pays in the 80s, and they've taken some people from like Toyota and the old Shell plant right next door to it. They've taken people from there,
Yeah,
but
change a lot of things that are going on in the county.
Right.
Data center, I'm not sure. I don't think it's supposed to. It will to build it, but not after they get it built. It
Right.
won't be employ that many people, and it is a controversy. You know, they're in right now. I think there's 4 or 5 different locations. They've got data centers planned or trying to get them okayed, and I can understand if I lived beside of it, I wouldn't want it there. You know,
I wouldn't either.
but but I don't know. It's hard to fight progress, and
Right.
I'm not sure what's going to happen with that. But now you, in 2004, you were selected as the West Virginia Conservation Officer of the Year in West Virginia.
Yeah.
That's a pretty big honor. I mean, that's
Yeah, I think it was 2003.
2003.
Yeah.
Okay. And then later, right around when you're going to retire, the Mason County Rotary, they honored you as the Officer of the Year
Right.
in Mason County. So those are good perks.
Yeah.
And so that when you're well thought of.
I had I worked a drug case that lasted from 2003 till 2014, and I got an award from the U.S. Attorney's Office there. But I didn't get to go. My daughter-in-law was in congestive heart failure at the time, and so I was keeping 2 boys, and ended up the baby girl was born about 6 weeks early. So we had 3 kids that we were taking care of while she was in Pittsburgh getting, treated for her heart problem. And
Start so early though. You're young.
well, I could have retired at 55. I waited to 59 and a half. But I probably retired early because I had made supervisor, and I was tired of supervising. When I was not supervising, it was kind of like working for yourself. I was lucky enough to work with people like Clarence Swirley that said, hey, get to know the people. You won't have any problem doing your job. They'll tell you everything you need to know as long as you keep them informed. And so I got to know people. I became part of the community by coaching ball, t-ball, baseball, wrestling. I coached wrestling for a couple of years. I got involved with church, and I was involved with stuff that was going on, and that's I liked all the people, and I never thought about coming back to this area. One of the things if you're in a police role, I've seen it happen way too often that if you're close to your family, sometimes they get involved because people's always wanting a favor. And I thought if I stay down there and I don't have anybody related to me except for the people under my roof, it'd be easier. And but I still had people that that knew my mom from where she done taxes.
Sure.
Yeah, where you from? I tell her, well, your mom does my taxes. And I just wrote this guy 2 or 3 tickets, you know.
Well, it's kind of funny. As a teacher, I never thought it would be wise to live in the district of the school that I taught at. I don't want nobody hanging in my house or anything like that. And so I thought it was not a bad idea. And most of the kids that I taught didn't even know where I lived, or had no idea anyway. I don't think they would have done anything, but you very active in the church and the community. That's I remember you even this was like 2008 or something. You wrote a letter to the editor in Beckley newspaper, and it was in support of Ron Kidd, the basketball coach at Woodward.
Ron, yeah.
And what prompted that? I mean, why'd you do that?
Ron and I competed against each other for midget league football all the way through junior high, and then after that, I became a wrestler, and Ron still played basketball and stuff. But he was a class guy. He was always good to me. We were just friends. Mm-hmm. We had a good friendship with him. I was always proud of the friendship that our wrestling guys established with the Woodrow guys and the Independence guys and the Big Creek guys. We were really close friends with the Baylor brothers, Jeff and Kevin. And in fact, when they would come up for the regional tournament 2 days, Mom would say, well, why don't you just get them to stay at our house? But they wouldn't stay. But, we became friends. But I just always thought Ron was a class act of a guy.
And it's funny how you establish friendships with competitors. And, we've had, when my boys were growing up, and we'd have camps during the summer, and I'd have guys come in and we'd have them sleeping on the floor and the couch and whatever, stay with us a week. And then when they get in high school, they'd be wrestling against each other, and those kind of things. But it was no, I never really saw actually wrestling is one of the least, or maybe the least, one of the least sports that's called unsportsmanlike or flagrant misconduct. As aggressive as it is, you don't get a lot of unsportsmanlike calls called and stuff. Yeah. And that was one of the things I was proudest of as a coach, football and wrestling. I never got flagrant or unsportsmanlike. I never got thrown out of a game or a match or anything. And I didn't set out to do it that way, but that's just the way. And I've seen bad calls. If you're in it long enough, you're going to get the good calls and you're going to get the bad calls. And it's just one of them. Sometimes the calls will favor you, and sometimes they won't. And it's one of those things.
When I was coaching wrestling in the youth league there, I had a kid that was really good, and his dad was helping me, and his boy made a bad move and got pinned, and when his dad come unglued, and I just grabbed a hold of the back of his belt, and I pulled him back down the chair, and I said, you either sit down or you're leaving. I said, don't make a spectacle of yourself, because being an official gave me a new look at officials.
Yeah.
And I never am vocal against, even if I think that was a terrible call. It's just the way it is.
Yeah, I think that's what helped me too, because I was an official and then as a coach. The only time, and I didn't see this very often, but sometimes if I thought a guy wasn't hustling, even in a youth match when the kids are 6 years old or 5 years old and they're out there and you're just kind of looking off or whatever, I'm like, you're talking about these guys' health. You gotta stay on top of this stuff. You got to be in there a little closer. And so that's one of them things. But well, listen. Jeff, I appreciate you coming by and talking to me. I've enjoyed. We don't get to see each other enough. It's one good thing about Facebook. We can kind of keep track of each other a little bit. What's going on? I'm glad you're happy where you're at. It seems like you've got a wonderful family, and I'm glad your mom is still around. And
Yeah, she fixed me breakfast this morning.
oh, good. Yeah, I always. Of course, Pate King said that your mom used to get on to her all day. We get on to him all the time. We didn't appreciate it, but he would laugh about it. It's kind of funny, we lost Pate a few years ago. And I went down to his funeral, and I'm allergic now to flowers and things like that. I can't be around, and so I always worry when I go to a funeral. I can't stay very long if there's a bunch of flowers. And so we went down to Mullins, and it's a memorial service. And I told my wife, I said, there's a lot of flowers, we just have to go in and go out, And we got in there, and there wasn't a lot of flowers because it was a month or two after he had passed away. And his daughter came up, and they had a guy that was going to speak, or two guys that were going to speak, and she said, I'm glad you came. And she said, could you talk a little bit about Dad's wrestling, because nobody else, one guy's going to talk about him working on the railroad, and the other guy was going, and I said, sure, I can do that. And so I could have told 1,000 funny stories with Pate King, and it was good. I felt honored to do that. But he was another guy. He was one of the officials that, he came from Mullins 2 or 3 times a week and called matches in Beckley, or the Beckley area. And with the youth, he never got paid, nothing. And it was just, and what people don't realize, you were part of these were pioneers that kind of set the stage for now.
Right.
Because wrestling now is big. We've got the high schools and junior highs. We've got around this area alone. We've got an Arsenal training center, and all of these guys practicing year round. They've got clinics going on, and Point Pleasant definitely got. They were top of the heap there.
Yeah, John Bonecutter, he was part of the Pee Wee program that we started.
Yeah.
Now he's won 5 or 6 different state championships down there.
And but it was things that were done a few years ago that kind of had set the stage or laid the foundation. But I appreciate you coming and talking to me, and come back anytime.
Appreciate it.
And good luck in Point Pleasant, and don't let them build too many data centers out there.
May have to move away.
And anybody else out there that'd like to be on our program, we'll get you on here, and just hit me up at awbennett50@gmail.com. And until next time, remember, if you're not dead yet, you're not done yet. And this is Wayne Bennett. God bless you.